three-term Yahaira, Graxirena, and Richard Rydant, CMRPC transportation planners. Yahaira is a project manager at CMRPC's transportation division. She is responsible for several work areas within the division, including public outreach, Title VI compliance, and the implementation of long-range transportation plan. She supports transit planning efforts within the agency and oversees the livability and healthy transportation programs. Rich Rydant is a transportation project manager with CMRPC. His career spans over 3 decades, and he's responsible for the completion of federal certification documents that assure the continued flow of U.S. DOT funding to the planning region. These tasks include long-range transportation plan and the Transportation Improvement Plan, or TIP, which has brought hundreds of millions of improvement in operational dollars to the planning region since inception. Rich is also responsible for the agency's freight planning activities that include rail freight. Sorry about that. He holds a degree in civil engineering from WPI. And finally, Congressman Jim McGovern. Mr. McGovern grew up in Worcester and was first elected to Congress in 1996. He's a senior member and chair of or co-chair of a number of House committees, including chair of the House Committee on Rules. The congressman has advocated for both rail and bus transportation improvements. He believes in investing in local infrastructure to bolster and sustain economic growth and investing in workforce development and training. So each guest will have about 5 to 10 minutes to speak before we open up for discussion and question. We'd love to hear thoughts from our guests about what they see as current issues in the region that need action and how these issues and solutions impact local communities and economies. The East-West Rail has also been a very hot button issue for a number of years. We'd love to hear your thoughts or updates about that project. So Senator Lesser, you'll be up first. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew, and thank you to my fellow panelists. And I do want to in particular recognize and thank Lieutenant Governor Murray for his leadership and inspiration for a long time, especially that very complicated and successful deal to expand Worcester-Boston service that now at this point is 12, 13 years old. And we've seen from that connection between Worcester and Boston the transformational impact that you've had in Worcester and in the greater Worcester area. Of course, there are a lot of other elements that have contributed to Worcester's renaissance, but the rail link was a key part. And frankly, for those of us in the Springfield area, we often point to Worcester and all the exciting things happening in the greater Worcester region as a model for us on how we can do similar growth and development and economic development projects in greater Springfield. I thought I would just quickly explain a little bit of the why on why we need this project so bad, and then give a just very quick legislative update on where we are. First, I think we can't lose sight of why West-East Rail is so important for Worcester County, for Hampden County, for Berkshire County, and for Boston, which is something that we can't lose sight of and we do need to continue to emphasize. The single biggest challenge we have in our state right now is housing. People can't afford to live. Rents are skyrocketing. It's creating immense inequality for people that own homes and are locked into lower mortgage rates versus people that are perpetually renting and in very unstable financial situations as a result. This project would create thousands of units of new housing, as it has done in Worcester. It would help create good transit-oriented development that's accessible for families and that's walkable. It would also be the single most transformational climate change project in our state's history. It would take thousands of cars off the road and clean our air. The region I live in, the Pioneer Valley, was rated recently as one of the worst places for asthma in the entire country. And that's because of a 6-lane highway that goes down a valley and captures air pollution at the basin of that valley. We have got to do more to get cars off the road and reduce emissions. It would also be an economic justice issue. We know that despite our leadership in the eds and the meds, our high-tech boom, our very fast-growing economy here in Massachusetts, whole regions, including big parts of our respective regions, Central Mass and Western Mass, have been left out of that growth and opportunity. West-East Rail would help pull so much more of that opportunity and that job creation to more parts of the state. Another piece that I also think is often left unsaid or is not emphasized enough, but does also need to be reinforced, is that this is also a racial equity issue. Springfield, Worcester, and Boston are our state's 3 largest majority minority cities. Springfield in particular, because Worcester has seen significant growth in recent years, but Springfield and points west of Springfield in particular have been locked out of a lot of the opportunity that you've seen in certain parts of Massachusetts in recent years. Connecting these 3 big cities, these 3 big metro areas, will help unlock opportunity and will help close our racial wealth gap. And this is a very important element to emphasize. So I'm really excited to be on the panel with everyone today. And I would just point out, we're at a very pivotal moment in this project, and I hope others will speak to this, and Congressman McGovern when he's on as well. There is money in the Biden infrastructure program to get this project moving. The missing piece, quite frankly, has been a MassDOT and a state administration that emphasizes regional rail, that emphasizes investments in our regions outside outside of the of a handful of zip codes in Boston, and that works to really put their shoulder to the wheel on infrastructure. We have some models. You saw what Tim Murray and his team were able to do with Worcester, Boston several years ago. We saw what was able to happen with the Green Line extension that recently opened when high-level leadership made it a priority. And we've seen recently the South Coast Rail announcements, which is now moving after 30 years of promises, again, because of high-level focused engagement. So that's what we really need at this point. And I'm really excited to have a good conversation with everybody on it.
Thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate it. Mr. Murray, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. We want to talk a little bit about, both commuter rail and freight rail. And I think you and Charlton are understanding and appreciating, the fact that Central Mass is both a road and a rail crossroads for all of New England and Northeast. That is creating huge opportunities and sectors that support rail distribution, packaging, et cetera. And it's kind of created an opportunity, certainly some challenges for cities and towns in the region, but expanding tax base and jobs. And the rail plays a big role in that regard. I want to congratulate Senator Lesser, as well as the 1-2 punch in Western Mass, Congressman Neal, for their work on East-West Rail. It is really important, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But as was mentioned, I was kind of reflecting in preparation today. I ran for city council in 1997, and really one of the major focuses of that campaign, and then 4 years later, my time as mayor, was the expansion of commuter rail between Worcester and Boston. And I saw a model of where expansion of commuter rail and the location strategically of commuter rail transformed a city that was once heavily reliant on manufacturing in Stamford, Connecticut. I attended Fordham University, as did 2 of my younger brothers, and the Metro North, I saw what that did for Stamford as New York City was experiencing incredible growth. Companies were looking for affordable options within the region. Certainly redundancy for a variety of different reasons, have companies looking to have operations in a couple different locations for continuity. That really helped create new levels of investment in Stamford. And I thought that was interesting. Later, when I became, elected to the city council and mayor, I saw the same opportunity through expanded commuter rail in Worcester. And working hand in glove with Congressman McGovern, we were able to expand from 6 commuter rail trains to 20 plus. And as was mentioned by Senator Lesser, that has had a huge positive effect on Worcester and central Massachusetts economy. When you talk to business owners and developers as to why they are reinvesting in property that they own, or new investors and developers coming into the city, invariably the issue of the proximity to Boston, the commuter rail location, and at Union Station in Worcester, again, a building that was vacant and empty and really a blight on the city in the late 80s, was transformed during the course of the 1990s into a modern intermodal transportation center. The grandeur of that building, of that historic building, was restored, and it is a true intermodal transportation hub with 20 plus commuter rail trains, the Worcester Regional Transit Authority, as well as private bus companies operating out of there. And you have seen, as we've added trains over time, the development take place in concentric circles around Union Station, with reverberations throughout the Central Mass area. And that creates opportunities and access to opportunities for a variety of different people who might not otherwise have that. We have seen incredible housing growth in the city of Worcester, much of that driven by people looking for more affordable housing options, but also want the amenities that a city like Worcester can offer, in central Massachusetts can offer. We have 3,800 units of housing currently under construction, and which have already been approved for permitting. That is a great opportunity for a city, but also presents some challenges. We want to continue to make sure affordable housing is a piece of that, and Worcester stays true to its commitment in that regard historically. And that's why our chamber has issued a very detailed housing study in 2019, which included the need for workforce and affordable housing. Related to the commuter rail issue is freight rail. I believe, as I said, it's almost 30% of all freight rail that passes through New England comes through Worcester and central Massachusetts. Those are job opportunities in warehouse distribution, packaging, and logistics that are important for a gateway city. Those types of jobs do give people access up the economic ladder, which is important, and those are jobs that we advocate for as well. As it relates to East-West Rail, really, I think it's a continuation of what we have been able to accomplish here in Worcester to benefit Springfield and the greater Springfield area and all of Western Mass. Having a train with the ability to go from Boston to Worcester to Springfield to Pittsfield, and point south from Springfield, connecting down through Connecticut to New York City, just helps our mega region, and giving people more options, where to live and work. That connectivity is critical. And as pointed out by Senator Lesser, we're really in an unprecedented time and moment, in the sense that the federal government, in a bipartisan way, passed a major infrastructure bill with targeted dollars for rail. We have CSX, which has recently been approved for a strategic expansion, and the state in a good financial position with not only ARPA money that they have received, but also state surpluses. So if there's ever a time to make that investment to truly benefit the entire state, that the time is now.
Thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate it. Yahaira and Richard, I'll turn it over to both of you next to take it over. I know you'd be going back and forth, so take it away.
Well, good morning, everyone, and it's good to be here, and certainly compliments to all the work that's been done by the senator. Certainly Tim here in Central Mass, his former role as Lieutenant Governor. Yes, the commuter in Worcester, I've certainly observed that growth, and it continues to this day. Just to follow up on some of Tim's comments there, right now they're building the center platform to accommodate more passenger trains concurrently at Union Station. It will be a great boost to the capacity there, and certainly Senator's well aware of the things that have happened over the last decades in the Pioneer Valley, great success there, and our colleagues at Pioneer Valley Planning Commission and Brennan, certainly we appreciated all his efforts and admire that work. But of course, we see there's the missing link there that we're talking about, that east-west access here. And with previous work that we've done here, it's been the dream of others prior, currently here, geez, could that commuter rail go to West Worcester? Could it go to Rochdale, Charlton, the Brookfields, etc., Palmer, making those important linkages and such. And certainly the momentum is there. There's certainly competing needs as well there, and we know these projects are costly. But there is the bill that had been passed there. Perhaps a congressman will comment on that in his words. But basically, an important thing that's happening now, I have like 3 quick points. First thing here is the MassDOT role, and to pick up on what the senator mentioned right now. This MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning currently is leading an effort for a long, excuse me, I'm having an issue here. For a statewide long-range transportation plan that has been named Beyond Mobility, that is currently under development, and they are seeking input to that plan. And whether it be individually or through the transportation subcommittees and such, working with Secretary Tesler and such, I would suggest, if it already hasn't, the wheels haven't already started moving, that east-west rail be mentioned in a prevalent fashion there among the competing needs that are associated with that, with passenger rail in the state. As we know, there's only limited amounts of money that are reasonably expected to be available to the Commonwealth, and those are reflected in the capital improvement plan that MassDOT is working on. So once you're in the long-range transportation plan for the state, the logical progression, as we move forward, would to be reflected in that CIP. And there had been recent public meetings in that. But just to shift gears here, some things that we're doing on the regional level, and there is a long-term plan for the regional plan underway now. That's called Imagine 2050, looking out to the mid-century there on a variety of topics. Here we have, it's built upon equity, economy, environmental pillars, holding up a roof of sustainability. And there's a steering committee associated with that. Tim is a member of that committee. We appreciate that. And similarly, Andrew, and was mentioned at their steering committee meeting, the inclusion of East-West Rail in that long-range plan because of everything that it touches, that the senator mentioned, the economy, the underserved populations, the opportunities that are missing at this point. However, let's see. Beyond that, and I'll be turning it over to Yahaira shortly here. The agency, CMRPC, is now embarking on redoing the regional transportation plan that's required every 4 years by USDOT. It's a multimodal document, and it touches upon all those other federal requirements that we now need to reflect performance management, climate change, again, the underserved populations. And basically, we're starting that now. It'll be done in about a year from now. And we're embarking on a public participation plan analysis and such. And Yahaira will have more details on that, but my point is similarly to the statewide transportation plan, Imagine 20, the regional plan, and then specifically the US DOT required long-range transportation plan that East-West Rail be mentioned in a prevalent fashion.
I think you froze there, Rich.
Yep.
Maybe we'll turn it over to Yahaira early. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Let me share my screen pretty quickly here.
We'll move to the tip, for instance. So with that, Yahaira, if I can pass it on through the chair, that'd be great.
Thank you, Rich. So as Rich was mentioning, there are many initiatives going on right now, and I feel that this, this is the right crossroads that we are on because we can include this project on the Beyond Mobility, the Mass DOT Long Range Transportation Plan, the Imagine 2050, the Regional Comprehensive Plan, and also on the 2050 Connections, that's the Long Range Transportation Plan that we are working on right now. To give you an overview of that plan, we are expecting to complete it by next year. So by June 2023, we should have a draft document with expectation of endorsement by July by the CMPO. During that year, we're planning to do heavy public outreach, do a needs assessment. That's part of our tasks. We're going to conduct a scenario planning, and also we're going to come up with a financial plan for the region in terms of transportation projects. The strategy, this is something that we typically do in transportation planning. We evaluate where we are at, what are our needs, and what is it that we want to accomplish by 2050. In terms of the actors, we want to be very intentional on who's at the table, who's at the sidelines, and who are we missing. And we want to have a good foundation for implementation in the next 4 years, so we can guarantee the best use of the resources available. In terms of the structure of the plan, we are thinking of 5 main areas. I'm sorry by my cat, he just woke up. So the East-West rail will be included in the major infrastructure projects as part of the regional significance of that particular project. We have other areas that include the asset management and operations, livability and healthy aging, transit and mobility management, as well as climate change and resiliency. And we're going to be working with all our communities in the region to be able to get those needs and priorities for each one of those areas. In terms of public involvement, we want to move away from consulting to actually getting to the point where our communities are our partners in the process. So that's why the involvement process, the activities related with the public involvement are going to be very strong at this point in time, rather than just going to your town and do a presentation. We really want to work with you to be able to come up with some projects that we can put on our pipeline moving forward. And these are the major elements that we're going to be looking at the project in the document. We are heavily relying on data, and we have multiple sources of data to determine the priorities in the region, but also the areas of opportunity. We want to do regional workshops, so that's where we're going to have regional events and talk with our partner communities to identify and validate those regional significant projects. The surveys are one of the tools that we use to really engage the public at large. The scenario planning, as I mentioned, that's the best way that we have to come up with the best mix of projects, considering the financial constraints. that the CMPO has for the region. We are relying heavily on the virtual public involvement, and we are creating a hub site as we speak, so people can interact with the different information and data and tools online. And the other element of the plan is that the intentional outreach to transportation disadvantaged populations. So we really want to incorporate the opinions and the needs of the underserved and underrepresented populations in the region. And pretty much that's in a nutshell what we work on the long-range transportation plan, but it's very important that the East-West Rail project to be included in this document, as well as the other documents that Rich mentioned, because that way we can have more power, right? In the sense that the higher the need, the best position the project will be to get funded. And that's everything that I have for you today. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much, Yahaira, and thank you very much, Richard. I see just on time, Congressman McGovern has just joined us. Give us a second to come up here. There he is. All right. Welcome, Mr. Congressman.
Hey, how are you?
Perfect. Just in time to pass the torch along to you to give your presentation.
Are we ready?
We're ready to go.
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me, everybody. And, I think it's important that we have gathering a space in central Massachusetts to have some conversations like this. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Hello to the fellow panelists, to everybody on the line. We have some great champions in our region who are on the Zoom. And let me just say that working with the folks at CMRPC is an absolute delight. And we're lucky to have a planning organization in our part of the state that is not only incredibly professional, but very forward-thinking. And over the years, I've huddled with the staff who have come up with some truly fantastic ideas that I think have made Central Mass even better. So for anyone who doesn't know, I grew up in Worcester, still live there. We've had a renaissance over the past few years, and I'm eager to see what's in store for the future, especially when it comes to transportation. We're in a unique moment that is making me optimistic. And I say that in spite of all the other crap that's happening here in Washington right now. But normally when we have conversations like this, we're envisioning what we can do in the absence of federal funding, or thinking about what we might do if Congress ever delivered. Much to my delight, and quite frankly, thinking about some of my colleagues, to my surprise, Congress and President Biden have delivered on a transportation and infrastructure package that is historic. As you all know, the president signed the bipartisan infrastructure law back in the fall, setting up the opportunity for some truly historic investments in our physical infrastructure, and kind of for a sense of scale, among many other areas where we're making investments. The infrastructure bill is making the single largest investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak. And we're putting nearly $40 billion into public transit. And all that's all said and done, Massachusetts itself is poised to receive somewhere around $12 billion. And that's over and above our normal federal appropriation. And I think it's going to mean that a lot of these projects, not just rail, but a lot of the other projects that have been on hold, everything from roads, bridges to broadband in Massachusetts, because of lack of funds, can now move off the list and can actually be completed. And I've been here for a while, and I've lost count of how many times we've heard about infrastructure bills, and what we got was infrastructure weeks and infrastructure press conferences and infrastructure press releases. We have a bill now. And I guess we'll just kind of close. I mean, the overriding message that I like to communicate is this: to meet the moment, we have to be working in unison, and we have to think big about what transformational investments for our region would actually look like. I've been a big proponent of East-West Rail for a long time, or West-East Rail if I'm out in the Pioneer Valley. It's emblematic what thinking big can do for us. as a driver of both economic development and regional equity. So there are provisions in this infrastructure law that we can utilize, like the new corridor identification and development program at DOT. Senator Markey and I worked to incorporate language from one of our bills, the Brain Train Act. He comes up with the titles. I just, I don't rhyme very well, but some of this language in these bills, can actually, actually pass. I mean, they're now part of the infrastructure bill, and that language can enable DOT to make intercity passenger rail really take off. But even if we have the funding and legislative text, we still need the collaboration, and we need to speak as a unified voice about what our vision is. And beyond East-West Rail, there are other projects around Central Mass that can have a big impact. And I just want to encourage everyone to be ambitious in what we can achieve. We have the opportunity to do more than just manage problems. We can solve them. Again, what is unique about this moment is that, we are not talking about where there might be money. There's money. I mean, the state is overflowing with money. And we got to make sure that it is not all spent in one place, and that we all get our fair share, and that we are coming up with projects that, quite frankly, are transformational, and things that really can make a real difference. So again, I look forward to the conversation. I'm excited to hear your ideas, and with that, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Congressman. So moving on to the Q&A, and I think a good starting question for this is essentially kind of around the establishment of a rail authority, which seems to be the first and next step of this process. What type of progress has been made toward the legislature establishing this type of authority? Do you foresee this being established this year, and what's the potential makeup of an authority that is overseeing an East-West rail connection?
So Congressman Neal and I and members of the mostly Western Mass legislative delegation actually had a meeting with Governor Baker to talk about, this very topic. And, and he believes that there ought to be a separate entity created to deal with this. I don't know enough about, whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. All I'm worried about is that we are in a position to apply for the money. And some of his transportation officials think we need to have this authority up and running in order to apply for the money. I don't think we do. I think I think what we need is the outlines of a plan, and while we're figuring out how to get this authority together, which the legislature has to create, we need to be making sure that we're not sitting here complacently while other states are drawing down the money. Again, that's beyond the $12 billion we're getting, but I mean that's programmatic money out there, and so we're pushing him hard to do that. And again, whoever the next governor is needs to hit the ground running, because I mean this money's not there forever, and other states, may have their acts together and try to compete for this. So we need to be. So we talked about talking to Secretary Buttigieg, maybe bringing him out, looking at some of this stuff. But the creation of a new authority has to come from the legislature, and I don't know how realistic it is to see, because they operate on a different calendar than we do. I mean, it seems like we never recess, and I know they're going to be recessing shortly. And then they need the buy-in of the speaker and of the Senate president to move. And somebody told me that the speaker may not, it was not particularly, I'm trying to think of the right word, maybe enthusiastic about moving in this direction. We need to change that. I mean, we absolutely need, we can't let this opportunity go by. The governor said he would work with the legislative delegation to try to help design what an authority would look like, and but whether or not it's up and running by the end of the year should not lessen the importance of us asking for the money, as soon as we can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Congressman.
Yeah.
Senator Lester.
Yeah, I can build off that. So first, I really want to thank Chair McGovern for his leadership on this for a very long time and securing the federal funding, which is the game changer. I mean, we couldn't do this without the federal infrastructure support. So just a couple of points on the authority. First, the authority is the way that MassDOT has preferred to apply for the money, but just building off what Chair McGovern said, it is not the only way. And in fact, MassDOT could apply for the funds on their own without the authority. There's an active process underway right now to try to get that authority language done. But as Chair McGovern pointed out, our calendar is up against the July 31 deadline, and we have gotten some pushback from some people in the legislature about the scope of this authority, what it looks like, will it have taxing power, for example, bonding authority, procurement power. There's a lot to work through. We will get there and we'll work through it, but we are up against this timeline, both of the legislature's July 31 deadline and the timeline for getting the application out for federal funds. So I just want to emphasize the authority is not the only way to get the federal money. The MassDOT can and routinely does apply for federal funds all the time. So I think we need to borrow a rail expression, we need double tracking here. We need an effort on a legislative process of getting this authority set up. At the same time, we really need to be working collaboratively with MassDOT on getting that application going and getting that application out to the bipartisan infrastructure bill to secure those funds, because many of them are on very tight timelines. And by the way, a lot of the other states that are actively applying for these projects, some have these types of authorities, some don't. Some of the applications are going through individual rail authorities. Some are being done through their state's Department of Transportation. So, Chair McGovern's exactly right. There's a path through the rail authority, but there's also a path through MassDOT while we kind of work out the details of that authority.
And let me just say, let me thank Senator Lesser for his incredible advocacy on this. He's been pushing this idea of east-west, west-east, depending where we're talking from, forever. And and I think he deserves a lot of the credit here for seeing this thing advance to where we are today. So but again, as we just said, we got to, the money's there, let's ask for it, let's get it going.
Thank you. From a more regional transportation lens on this, do you foresee expanding from the east-west rail potentially, any sort of regional trolley system that may utilize some of the old rail beds to maybe better serve some of the communities that aren't directly connected to the east-west rail? And how would this essentially assist towns without that direct access?
Who's that for?
I figure from the regional planning.
No, who's the question for, me or Eric?
I'm sorry, it was for Richard or Yahaira, I guess.
Again, good morning, everyone, and welcome, Congressman. Basically, once, just to use an example, for instance, to attempt to answer that, certainly the commuter rail on the Worcester line has become very popular. You heard Tim talk about the increase in trains, the further capacity additions being made at Union Station and such. But I think there's out in Westboro area, there's been the implementation of a shuttle service service that will continue to be funded by the WRTA. And that's an example that it provides service within the community, but it also brings people to the commuter rail stations in some fashion. And that's occurring elsewhere along the MBTA system. So once there's that, perhaps that mass of individuals has reached that critical mass there, then these types of services can be considered and monitored as the ridership increases. And there's been a lot of success stories with that. So, for example, should this come to fruition, one would imagine that you would have feeder services, perhaps by van or small bus to begin with. Not to say that there could be other modes perhaps considered in the future.
Thank you, Richard. On a slightly different topic, there's actually a question in the Q&A relative to bikeway programs, such as that were established in Millville and South Uxbridge, and kind of, I guess, pointed to Senator Lesser. Is there plans in the works or kind of plans in the future to continue expanding programs such as that may be, adjacent to expanding our regional transportation networks?
Sorry, Andrew, talking specifically about the bike program.
Yeah, bike trail program
Yeah.
was what the question.
Well,
was asking about.
I'll let the others chime in on this, but absolutely. There's actually, I believe many of those bike and environmental infrastructure projects are eligible for the ARPA money that's still, kind of working. It has already obviously been secured by the federal delegation and is now being procured through the governor's administration, through the legislature. So there will be a lot of opportunity through that. We also are significantly increasing the environmental and conservation line items in this year's FY23 budget, and we'll be doing, I believe, another supplemental budget even after that. So absolutely, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to continue to build that out and also to work on integrating the different nodes. I have some experience in the Pioneer Valley, for example, of connecting and Chair McGovern knows this well too. The Springfield, Chicopee, Holyoke, Northampton sort of Connecticut River corridor now has a completely integrated bike infrastructure that has taken a long time to get done, but is a really big asset. So the short answer is yes, and I think that there's several different pots of resources that we can draw upon. Not to mention CPA funds in cities and towns, and there is a big effort underway to finally get to that 100% match on CPA, which we're still a long ways off from, but I do view as a really important commitment the state has made to cities and towns. So I think the short answer is yes. We do have a lot of different opportunities to pull resources for it.
If I could just jump in there in part to answer, Andrew, that question and the one before that. The federal government and the state, and Jim has been a leader in that, working with then Senator Moore. I had a chance to work with Governor Patrick and some of the reps and senators in the Blackstone Valley to, make some significant improvements to the Blackstone Valley bikeway and the corridor for a variety of different uses, and the bike path and the walking path. That's an element of it, creating some connectivity. It's interesting, as rail has grown in Worcester, and we've seen it also play a big role in Providence with the Amtrak there, that there have been private sector companies looking at using that Providence and Worcester rail line, which really is contiguous to those bike lanes, those bike paths, about private service that would connect to the two hubs in Worcester and Providence. So again, if we can continue to build the critical mass here in Worcester with connections through to Palmer and to Springfield, again, you're just creating a situation where it's more feasible for a private sector partner to complement what the public sector is doing, or a contract with a governmental entity down the road. But I think the core right now needs to us to, core mission right now is that east-west rail, of moving that forward. It's in the collective interest of the Central Mass legislative delegations in Western Mass. And as Senator Lesser pointed out, it may not always seem obvious to people in the greater Boston area, whether they be legislative leaders or business leaders and policy makers, but it's in the greater Boston's interest to have that connectivity as well.
And if I didn't see Tim on the call here, but let me thank him too for his leadership. We wouldn't have the rail connections in Worcester if it weren't for his leadership when he was Lieutenant Governor, and so many other things. But look, on the rail stuff, Massachusetts is getting $12 billion. That's aside from the other programs that they can apply for that are nationwide. $1 billion at a minimum ought to be set aside to get this project up and running. Number two, on the bikeway stuff, I mean, it is shameful to me that that we have not completed the Blackstone Valley bikeway. I mean, Rhode Island got its act together, has this incredible bikeway. We have a little piece of it in Worcester into Millbury. Then I think we're building a piece in Blackstone. I mean, we ought to get that done. And this money, the infrastructure money, the ARPA money ought to be used to do it. The money is there, and we need to increase the political pressure on the state to make it a priority. That can help transform economically the whole Blackstone region. It makes it more livable, more of a destination point. People like, these walking paths and bikeways. I mean, businesses locate around them. I mean, this is incredibly effective investment. But the money is there. We got to make the people who make these decisions in the various departments just say, okay, let's just do it. What are you waiting for? And again, I've seen what it has done out in Western Massachusetts. We've seen how it's helped, the economy of Rhode Island. Let's get it done. The money is there. Let's get it done.
Thank you. So I guess big elephant question in the room here is, let's just say, the state applies for the funding tomorrow, gets its act together and establishes the commission. What's the realistic timetable for, establishing that connection between Springfield to Worcester on the East-West Rail?
To anybody? Or?
Yeah, to anybody who's willing, brave enough to answer.
Working as a city council candidate in 1997, then getting on and working with Jim McGovern, during my time as mayor, as lieutenant governor. It was working with CSX. It was working with the state. It was putting together the funding. Thankfully, we were able to get the funding to do the acquisition and the improvements through transportation bond bill at the state level. It's hard work, but I think the ingredients are there as we speak in terms of political leadership at the state and federal level. The Congressman McGovern and Congressman Neal were able to secure a significant portion of dollars. And CSX most recently in the conversation in their acquisition of Pan Am has put language out and testimony that they want to be a partner in working through this. And I think the Worcester Framingham to Boston expansion is a good template and how that could work. We want to make sure we're serving both the needs of our commuter rail and passenger rail, as well as our freight rail, and that can coexist, but we want to be methodical about it and thorough. But the dollars are there. I think the will is there. It's just going to take a continued persistent effort. But time is important because we don't want to lose those federal dollars beyond what Congressman Neal and Congressman McGovern were able to secure. So there is a certain level of urgency to make sure that we are seeking those dollars and getting the various partners and communities involved together.
And I'm going to have to excuse myself because I get 2 minutes to cast a vote here. But let me just respond by saying this: if you don't ask, you don't get. All right. And so the collaborations, the discussions with all the relevant parties are happening. Tim just talked about that. Eric talked. We all talked about that, right? So that's all good. you know, and the money is there. So that's all good, but we got to ask for it. And, and that will determine how quickly we can start making progress. I mean, we can talk about this, until the cows come home, but if we're not asking for the money, if we're not putting money aside, some of it is within the state control, the money they now have in their account. And some of it is these federal programs that myself, Congressman Neal, Senator Warren, Senator Markey will fight like hell for. But we can't fight like hell for them to come to Massachusetts unless there is a request and an ask made. So that is the next step. We have to push all the excuses like, well, we need the authority up and running before we don't. We have to commit. If we were doing this, we have to ask for the money. And the final thing I'm going to say is, time is of the essence because these accounts will be drawn down. And I don't know whether in my lifetime, we are going to have an opportunity to get the kind of infusion of federal money for infrastructure like we now have ever, whether that will ever come again. So this is the moment. And we will, we're all doing all the stuff we're supposed to do. We need now the state to say, this is a go, we're putting money aside and we're applying for more money. So, and we can do it. But anyway, on that, I apologize because I gotta vote and anyway, I'm available if anybody wants to follow up. But anyway, good to see everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
Yeah, Andrew, if I could just add what, be just building off what Chair McGovern said, and he said it very clearly. I mean, the authority is in many respects a bit of a red herring. The authority is the ideal structure that some view as the ideal structure for overseeing and running the railroad. But all 50 states are applying for money from the federal infrastructure plan, and only a handful have authorities like this. So I think that the focus needs to be on getting the application into the feds, and then we see where it goes from there. But the idea that we would hold an application back in anticipation or in preparation for a eventual authority is not the right strategy. And I clearly it seems Chair McGovern was referencing that, and I feel strongly as well. The MassDOT applies for funds all the time, and is able to apply for funds all the time. And by the way, just building off of what Lieutenant Governor Murray was alluding to, once this funding is secured, there is a very, very intensive process after that of working with the freight operators, working on the right-of-way issues, working with the regional planning authorities, working with the impacted cities and towns, the abutters, the environmental reviews, etc. So there's a lot more that has to happen, and all of us acknowledge that. But the first thing that has to happen is the application has to get put in to get the money, and we need the Baker administration and MassDOT to do that.
Thank you. Well, question relative to zoning requirements, which may be more of a regional planning question. So we know in the MBTA communities, they enacted special zoning requirements that there be, the multifamily housing within a certain area. Do you guys foresee any sort of similar requirements for East-West rail communities potentially in the future? Richard, if you want to take that one.
Yeah, I'll admit immediately, I've even through osmosis, working with my colleagues, I know little about zoning, but basically you can see that is in fact, what had just happened there with the MBTA communities being looked at to, in fact, prepare themselves in some fashion for high density dwellings within the corridor. I could foresee that happening in the future based on some of the commentary here. We're trying to, again, serve traditionally underserved populations and such. So it seems logical. It seems that would be something that would be a part of this. I don't know if my colleague has anything to add to that. Yeah, Yahaira.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the basis of the transit-oriented development, is that the stations become a regional node or a community node, depending on the hierarchy of the TOD, right? So the zoning and the overlays of the any policy, housing policy, will need to come into place in all these areas. And it's not only housing, but also the impact of small businesses and newcomers on these areas. So it will have a rippling effect on all these communities, especially in the rural areas that right now have been underserved.
And I think Yahaira is exactly right. I just recently was out in Palmer with some of the rail advocates, which is a logical stop, but that would happen on East-West Rail between Worcester and Springfield. And huge opportunity there to revitalize a downtown, developable lots that you could build that density for affordable and market rate. We saw that happen around Union Station. Some of the first development was a combination of market rate and affordable housing. And certainly, the Union Station, which Congressman Neal has led the revitalization of that in Springfield, lots of opportunities and lots perhaps underutilized that would be perfect for high density housing, both affordable and market rate. So I would hope that would be part of any conversations desperately needed, and supports the businesses that are there now and future business that will come where you have that density of people.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just add, unfortunately, I have an 11:30 I'm going to have to jump to, but I see Jessica Sizer, just for example, from Palmer on, who's been a big champion of the Palmer stop, as am I. I was involved with and helped write the zoning reform language that was just referenced, the MBTA communities provisions, as well as the housing choice provisions. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. We need to incorporate zoning into the planning for West-East Rail. But the one thing I would point out is many of the stops are already properly zoned. There's obviously going to need to be adjustments, but just for example, Springfield is a very dense, very walkable city, especially the downtown area where Union Station is located. It's ready to go. In fact, there used to be dozens of trains that went back and forth between Boston and Albany, stopping in Springfield. So you've got that walkable downtown configuration already ready to go. Palmer, obviously a smaller community, but downtown Palmer is also fairly compact, walkable around the train station because of their legacy, and of course Worcester and Boston. So yes, we will have to incorporate the zoning reforms to make the most out of these stops, but a lot of it is there because of the legacy we have of those trains coming in and out of those communities 70, 80, 90 years ago.
Thank you. And so one last question, we'll wrap up here. Can individual communities apply for this batch of federal funds directly without the state's involvement? No.
I don't know the answer to that question, but
Yeah.
it would not make a lot of sense. You would want to get some economies of scale and efficiency here, and continuity of plans. So I don't know the answer to that definitively, but it would not make sense.
Yeah, I definitely see it as a major infrastructure project that has an impact at the state level. And obviously the local communities will benefit from it. But the vision and the intent, it is, impact at for the whole Commonwealth. And as one of the panelists mentioned, is that the mega region that's going to benefit from this project.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you very much, all of our panelists, for our time. Thank you for everybody for attending. Appreciate everybody's impact here. Hope to see you guys at the next one, and stay in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
That was